Hey everybody, Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com, back to do another video and talk about everything that happened on day 2 of the NFL Draft. The Steelers, a little less eventful in terms of them standing pat at 66 and 83, but making two selections that one was probably anticipated, the other was, I think, a bit of a surprise, but we're going to talk about each here, and we'll start with 66 overall with Deontay Johnson, the receiver from Toledo. And at first blush, I was pretty surprised. You saw all these big, name receivers that we've heard about and really viewed as slam dunk solid day 2 picks. Guys like Miles Boykin from Notre Dame, you guys know that I've talked about plenty. Hakeem Butler from Iowa State, who I know this team hasn't shown a lot of interest in, but certainly would make sense and would have been a fit. Riley Ridley from Georgia. The list goes on and on of receivers that you could talk about, but they go with Deontay Johnson. And it did seem like a reach in the moment because I think most people thought probably at best you're looking at a 5th round pick. I thought maybe 5th was his ceiling of where he would go, looking more with those trio of 6th round picks. But to hear the Steelers explain it, and Daryl Drake, the receivers coach, who's cut from that similar cloth as Richard Mann, the coach that he replaced, is honest and candid and is going to tell you straight about how he felt and kind of how everything happened. And according to him, he said that had the Steelers not taken Johnson at 66, Bruce Arians in Tampa Bay would have taken him at 70. So, you hear that side of things, and you hear Deontay Johnson's agent telling Johnson that he was projected to be probably a late 3rd, 4th round pick, early 4th round pick, and Daryl Drake talking about everybody being at Toledo's pro day. They had 3 receivers that could get drafted. Johnson, there's 2 guys actually with the last name Johnson, and Cody Thompson, who's a little bit of a different body type. Daryl Drake said that all the coaches were at Toledo's pro day and everybody raved about Deontay Johnson. And so maybe we're wrong, so obviously the national media it doesn't always mesh with the valuation of what the league has, and Deontay Johnson could certainly be a perfect case of that. We're talking about a guy last year in Chukwuma Okorafor that we're saying, wow, where'd this guy come from? So there generally is that 3rd round surprise, that first name where you go, I wasn't too sure that the team was that interested in him. But of course, we knew the Steelers had interest in him. They had Daryl Drake and Danny Smith at Johnson's pro day at Toledo, and then they brought him in for a pre-draft visit. So, to have Deontay Johnson in your mock draft would have been common, I'm sure, and certainly not a bad idea. But to see it in the 3rd round was a surprise. But again, you hear Daryl Drake say it, you hear them talk about where he was actually projected to go within league circles. He wasn't getting out of the 3rd round, and Drake says he wouldn't have gotten past 70 with Tampa Bay. So let's put that aside for a second. Because bottom line is, regardless of where you take these guys, if they're good, it's a good pick. If they don't work out, it's a bad pick, no matter really where these guys are getting slotted. And I admit I didn't watch a ton of Deontay Johnson, so I wasn't commenting too much initially on the player. Just, again, going back to the evaluation and where I thought he would have gone and kind of the surprise with that. But I just went through a couple games of him, reading the reports that Daniel's written about, some other clips that floated out on Twitter, Nick Farbaugh. I had some good breakdowns of him, and I can totally see why he was their guy. You're looking for that X receiver to replace Antonio Brown, and Johnson can play there. He did it at Toledo. They moved around. He played in the slot. He played in the backfield. So he's worn a lot of hats, and I think he has the traits to be that X receiver. I've always said the best receiver is an open one. Guys that can create separation, guys that can get open. And if you're wide open, it doesn't matter if you're 5'10", 190. You're an open 5'10", 190, and you're going to get the ball, you're going to make plays, and you're going to be a productive player for your offense. And Johnson certainly has the burst and separation and the nuances of route running to create space at the top of the route, to beat tight coverage, beat the corner off the line, and win on his routes. And I think that's certainly, it's a requirement to play that X spot unless you are just a crazy big guy where you can box out some of these guys. But I think still separation is going to be an innate trait to be that X receiver where you're backside in a 3-by-1 formation, which is common. The corners rolled up, the safeties over the top. You might be seeing some bracket coverage. You have to be able to create that space, and I think Johnson has the nuance and burst to be able to do that. And I think he does play faster and quicker than maybe how he timed at Indianapolis. So I like those traits. I like his body control, ability to adjust. He can. I'm not saying he's making a ton of catches outside his frame, though I think I have seen him do that, but he certainly can adjust to the ball and then catch it within his frame. So going over his head or adjusting back shoulder or adjusting to wherever the pass is thrown. I think he's capable of that. And the guy just makes big plays. The guy is nose for the end zone, 23 touchdowns in 3 seasons receiving. He had double digits in 2017. And a guy that has a threat in the return game as well. He's done kicks, he's done punts, and he's done both at a high level. I think he's got 2 career kick return touchdowns, 2 career punt return touchdowns. This guy's tape is littered with big plays. 98-yard kick return touchdown here. I put on the Ball State game in 2017. He scored 3 touchdowns that day. I think 2 80-yard scores and a 87-yard punt return or something like that. Just 3 big explosive plays on all 3 of his touchdowns. So that's what you want in an next receiver. And I have an article that's either up now or it'll go up soon on Steelers Depot that looks at those 3 traits. The 3 traits in the next receiver that you want to see is that separation, that route running ability, the body control, and the big play ability. And I think he does, at some level, check all those boxes. Now, the things you all were worried about him, maybe some of the hands, the concentration, being able to catch outside your frame. Honestly, the size is going to be an obvious thing that you look at. And against true press coverage, he can get locked up and he can get bumped and rerouted, and that's a concern. I worry about some of his play strength after the catch. You look at someone like those big X receivers like a DeAndre Hopkins, well, they can win because they are such big guys. Juju, not an X receiver, but he wins because of his size, and he has that natural strength that comes along with it, which is bigger than a lot of corners. Well, Deontay Johnson's not going to have such a luxury, so I worry about him after the catch. Can he break tackles? Can he have that strength? AB, what made Antonio Brown so special is that he's a similar size as Deontay Johnson, but he's just all muscle, and he's just such a difficult guy to tackle. The strength that AB has is one of the defining traits, along with his route running and, of course, his hands, that really make him the elite receiver that he is. And I don't see currently that strength with Deontay Johnson. That's going to limit him, I think, as a yak threat, and it's going to really put the onus on him creating space to just run away from these guys, rather than being able to make these contested plays and being able to throw guys off and have body control and contact balance and break some tackles. So that's something that you want to look at with him. But I like the versatility. I think one reason why James Washington struggled last year was because, and Dave Bryant really pointed this out from the get-go, because he went through, basically every snap of Washington's career. He said he was just kind of a one-side guy. He didn't move around the formation at Oklahoma State. And in Pittsburgh, and really most places, and Daryl Drake talked about this as well in his press conferences, that you have to have versatility. Although the Steelers generally had defined places for their receivers, they did move guys around. You saw AB in the slot, Juju got kicked out. Guys move around. Even Ryan Switzer played on the outside a little bit, and that's just to create matchups, give different looks, take advantage of the particular game plan. When you're not used to moving around and wearing all those hats and different responsibilities and alignments and route trees and coverages you're going to see, that creates an issue. And I think that's certainly one reason why you saw James Washington struggle, because he was trying to learn just a general transition to the NFL, but not just learning one spot, learning multiple spots. And I think that probably hurt his progress and stagnated things. And I think Johnson's a guy that's played inside, he's played outside, he's moved around the formation, he's used on motions to ID coverages, so I think he's comfort with really lining up most anywhere on the field. Now, you're not going to see him as a Z receiver, probably, but he can play the slot, he can play the X. Like I said, he got some time with the running back. They even tried to throw some passes with him. They tried one trick play. What game was it? I check my notes here. He didn't actually throw it, but it was against Eastern Michigan this past year, where they tried to do a wide receiver pass and nothing was open, and he pulled it down for a 12-yard gain. But wore a lot of hats, and that is certainly intriguing. Guys that have moved around, because in college football sometimes you just put a guy, especially a talented guy, in one spot and just let him win and do his thing, but not with Johnson. So am I going to love the pick? No, I'm not going to say that. I'm not there yet, but I certainly see the traits and the rationale for why this team was interested and why this team took Deontay Johnson. So we'll keep diving into his tape. We'll talk about it some more. But I understand the pick, and I get the ways that Johnson wins and the resume that he has in his background that makes him an attractive fit for the Steelers, in lieu of trading away Antonio Brown and attempting to find someone to help replace him. Not that one guy's going to replace Antonio Brown. It's a team collective effort. But Deontay Johnson certainly has some traits that can work in the NFL. The second pick, 83rd overall. This one I'm probably be more critical of, but I'm not trying to be Debbie Downey here. I'm just trying to be honest with my evaluation. And we talked about Justin Lane, the corner from Michigan State, several times in the podcast. I have my draft profile on him. I wrote the report on him. And I wasn't crazy about him. And I'm not going to change my opinion on Justin Lane just because he's wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform now. I think that would be disingenuous from me. If I was like, oh, this guy's not that good, and then he gets drafted by Pittsburgh, and I say, oh, this guy's pretty good. And I don't want to say that he's not good. There are certainly things that are attractive and things you like about Justin Lane, and those are aspects I talked about and have in my report. Obviously, from a baseline level, corners that are 6'1", 200 pounds with length and ability to find the football are attractive. Everyone's trying to find these, corners that can match up against some of these big, strong receivers who you're going to have to match up against A.J. Green. About Odell Beckham Jr., not the biggest guy in the world, but certainly a big, a strong guy that plays bigger. You look at, Jarvis Landry, not a huge guy either, but you want to have someone that has good play strength against him, someone that can make plays in the football against Jarvis Landry. Miles Boykin just got drafted by the Baltimore Ravens. 6'3", 220-pound guy. You got to have someone to match up on him. So I understand the allure of Justin Lane, and I think he does track the football well. I think his ball skills are plus. Terrell Lawson said that, but I pointed that out a long time ago. I'm going through my tape of him winning some of those contested jump ball situations. I think that's where he excels. My concern with Justin Lane is twofold. I talked about this on the podcast too. Lack of speed and some stiffness and tightness in his hips. He's a 4'5" guy, and I think he plays about that, maybe a tick slower on tape. And he can certainly, get burned by some of these faster receivers. Watch the Ohio State game with the speedsters they have with Johnny Dixon and Terry McLaurin and Paris Gamble. I thought he struggled in some of the open field situations. I think he works best in the red zone, whenever he's not playing as much in space, not defending as much stuff vertical. So I worry about that long speed, and then I worry about the stiffness as well. Generally with those bigger, longer, leaner corners, they tend to pop up when they're not as fluid in their turn as some of the smaller guys. And I do see some of that stiffness and tightness on Lane's tape. So when you have that combination of a guy that's going to play a lot of man coverage, and a guy that might have a little bit of stiffness in his hips, and a guy that does not have great recovery speed, I worry about giving up the big play. Does he win in certain situations? Yeah, I think if he's in phase and he's there at the catch point, he's going to perform well. But I worry about the open field situations, giving up that big play. I think there's going to be a developmental process with him, which is understandable and expected. This was a guy that played receiver early in his career with Sparty and, switched to corner, and this is a Brian Allen kind of deal. I don't know if he's quite the athlete that Brian Allen was out of Utah, but he might, have... I think he might be a little bit further along in his progression than Brian Allen was coming out of Utah, so there's a little bit of a difference there. So a guy that, an outside corner for sure, not playing in the slot, not talking about that, but a guy that, I would hope wouldn't play right away, and historically the third-round picks aren't going to play a ton. He's going to help on special teams, of course, be used on kick coverage and used as a gunner on punts. But I'm not crazy about this one. Not saying it's a terrible pick. Not saying this guy doesn't have a chance. He wins in certain situations, and there's places where he thrives, and there's places where I think he's going to struggle. And I just, can you correct the speed? Not really. Can you correct the tightness? A little bit. But I think naturally those big guys are always going to be a little tight, unless you're just that good of an athlete. And I don't see a great athletic profile with Justin Lane, and that's the thing that concerns me about him. So I'm just being honest. I'm always going to keep it real with you guys. I'm not going to change my tune just because, the pick goes one way, because someone becomes a Steeler, somebody doesn't become a Steeler. Just going to be consistent with it, and that's been plain to see, and that anyone that's seen the scouting report knows that information, and I'm not going to change my answer because you guys will call me on it, and as you should. So those are the picks. Going into day 3, a quick preview there. You're looking at tight end, looking for a safety dime guy. That hasn't been addressed yet, and I was, wondering when that would come in. There were still some good safeties on the board, so, could you see an Amani Hooker or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? Watch out for my guy Sheldrick Redwine from Miami, from the U. That's someone to pay attention to. Tight ends, you got Trevin Wesco, Elise Mack, Foster Moreau, who we all kind of feel like is going to be a Steeler, or at least a Steelers type of dude. Could it be running back? We're going to see some more DB help. Once you get into day 3, you're just looking at value and talent and trying to get the best players, a little less so than you're trying to focus on need, because if you're drafting for need on day 3, you're in trouble already. So a long day 3 ahead of us. Let me wrap up this video because I want to get back to finish up some work tonight, get some extra articles written for you guys. But my thoughts on Deontay Johnson, Justin Lane. Not my favorite day 2 in the world, but I'm warming up a bit to Deontay Johnson and Justin Lane. I get it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I certainly get it. So, love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Deontay Johnson and Justin Lane, whether you're watching on YouTube Steelers Depot, or follow me on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.